So hi everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah, excellent. So it's great to be here among so many friends and colleagues, and especially so many young people that are the ones that probably will be the ones that are shaping our field, right, in the next years. So first of all, let me say thanks to the organizer of this Bienal, Ion, Genaro, Idoia, Josu, Miquel, and Miquel. And of course, thanks to the Spanish Royal Society of Physics, his president Luis, and all the current leadership of the society, which has always supported our endeavors to accelerate the adoption of AI techniques in physics. So first, let me introduce the members of the panel. We are lucky to have Verónica Sanz. She's a full professor at the University of Valencia and previously at Sussex University in the UK. And she has worked at a number of top-tier institutions, MIT, Harvard, Yale, Boston University, York, Durham University. She also has worked at CERN. And her main research line is on particle physics. And you know, there they are trying to answer huge questions, huge fundamental questions, like the genesis of the universe. And to do that, she makes use of AI as a part of the toolkit or numerical tools that they use to create these mathematical models that are modeling this nature behavior in this very complex context. And then beyond her activities in fundamental physics, Verónica also uses AI in a variety of broader questions, such as ecology, politics, and art. So thank you, Verónica, for joining the panel.
Thank you.
And we are also very lucky to have here Claudio Zeni. Claudio is currently a senior researcher at Microsoft Research Cambridge, and he's contributing to the AI for Science initiative there. He received his PhD in computational physics at King's College in 2020, I don't know if in the middle of the pandemics, and then worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the International School of Advanced Studies before joining Microsoft Research in 2022. Claudio's research is focused on leveraging AI to address environmental issues, specifically using material science. So he has been working on discovering new materials and understanding their atomic level behavior. And his expertise is mainly on, includes machine learning force fields, generative models for crystals, and molecular dynamic simulations. So thank you, Claudio, for being here today.
Thank you.
And finally, I believe most of you know me already, but just let me say I'm a professor titular at Universidad Autónoma de Madrid, where I'm the PIE of the AI for Materials Lab, where we are basically trying to create new algorithms and integrate new AI machine learning methods to advance condensed matter physics and material science research. I did my PhD at Autónoma, then I moved for my postdoc to MIT, and then I got a Ramón y Cajal position at Autónoma in 2010. Okay, so let's kick off the panel, and to do that, let me start by sharing a quick personal story. So it was the fall of 2018, and I found myself sitting down in a random seminar at MIT. To tell you the truth, I wasn't very sure about the topic of the seminar. This is actually something pretty common that you do at MIT, because there are so many seminars and activities that you just go there, you sit down, and you know that you will learn something amazing.
There was free pizza, right?
There are also free food. That is also an interesting point. So the PhD student giving the presentation, the name was, and it's actually, it was Peter Lu, and now he's in the University of Chicago, was talking about a new approach in which you basically can simulate a physical process without having to code the physical laws or your model of that, of the model that you have built for that physical process. You just go ahead and take some data that have been generated by that process, and then you plug that data in some algorithm, and from then, from that you get some physics simulations, and then actually that captured completely my imagination, and then I started working very hard on that topic, and particularly in the application of that idea to condensed matter physics and material science, and since then. The field has evolved at an incredible pace. So it was clear, and it is clear now, that at the beginning there was a lot of hype around the application of machine learning to physics, but probably now the application of machine learning to physics has moved to a different stage, to a more settled phase, where machine learning techniques are used every day and are now fully integrated in, I would say, most of the fields of physics, including particle physics, cosmology, quantum many-body physics, quantum computing, chemical physics, material science, and many more. So in this context of this rapid advance of AI, so what I want to start doing in this panel is dig a little bit more on a question that is emerging: is what is the current narrative of AI, right? In this context. So on the one hand, AI can be seen as a tool, a powerful tool, but just as an additional tool to the toolkit available for a physicist, right? So with machine learning, you can automate complex calculations, you can identify patterns in big data, and you can optimize experiments. So this is one of the narratives around AI nowadays, okay? But there is another narrative that is emerging these days that is presenting AI not just an auxiliary tool, but a fundamental change on how we conduct physics research. So this perspective suggests that AI basically is introducing a new methodology and discovering or leading to discoveries that would have been not possible or practical without any other technique. And even there is this field of AI in which algorithms are able to autonomously, without human intervention, to perform research, learn from data, and plan, for instance, the next experiment to do, and so on. So I wanted to hear your insights on this shift or this question, if we are moving to a more data-driven paradigm in our field, and this is if you feel this is a fundamental change in our field. Go ahead, Verónica.
I can? Okay. So my field is particle physics. This is traditionally an area of fundamental physics where we have good modeling, and we aim for that. The point is to discover the ultimate theory, right? So we don't want to just model to achieve some result. We actually want to understand. That's the most precious thing. And we gather data to understand. So in that context, I think particle physics has been, as usual, early adopters of this new technique. It had been in the experimental particle physics area. It's been used for, the experimentalists will tell you, decades. But it's always been taken as reluctantly, in the sense that it's okay to use AI as a way of accelerating simulations, because, as you say, using data, you can actually let the AI algorithms to learn the rules of the game and become very good simulators without telling all the microscopic intrinsic laws. So that's really good for simulating. But there is this reluctance that AI ends up being a kind of a black box, and this is diverting us from our ultimate goal, which is to understand fundamentally physical phenomena. So thinking, personally, back in 2015 or so. So it's not so long, 2015, yeah. It was long ago. The experimentalists were still telling me, no, AI is just yet another big, fast neural networks, what I mean, deep learning. And we've been using this, and we don't need this. We already have very advanced statistical techniques and very advanced simulation techniques. And it's gone from this skepticism to, I would say, full adoption. Simply because, these marginal gains that you get from AI are super important in our field. That's for the experiment. But I think little by little, the same as you had your eureka moment, we are realizing in the theory side that AI is more than just this. It's more than just a simple black box that is able to compress or simplify physical phenomena. It seems to understand things. So I can give you examples. The first one is only from 4 years ago. So researchers were training an AI, an unsupervised, a variational autoencoder, with data from collisions, so the before and after, in terms of momenta, let's say. Very simple mechanics second-year exercise. So I gave a lot of these examples, and then the variational autoencoder is this neural network that has a point that is a kind of the minimum or more abstract point. They open that in the sense of look at the activation of these neurons, in fact, one neuron there, and they realized that if they plotted total angular momentum versus the activation, they were fully correlated. They haven't been given, the data was for momenta. The variational autoencoder, the AI algorithm, was able to distill all this information through all these examples and realize that there was something didn't know about, but is angular momentum. That was the most important and descriptive thing of this process. So you go a bit beyond, it tells you that this variational autoencoder has discovered a concept, which is the conservation of a particular quantity in this kind of collisions. This is a very simple example. Any second-year student can understand that. And then we, at least in my own research, I've seen this again and again, which is these AI algorithms trained with enough data, they do distill important concepts. In particle physics, we are used to think on these concepts as conservation laws. Conservation laws come from symmetries. Symmetries are important, and they are the fundamental description of nature. So I think there is a lot to be researched in this direction. The AI as a way of discovering new principles that we don't think about. This is at least what I think, but this is a bit at odds with the usual workings of particle physics, which is you think on ideas, then you test them, the experiment tells you, no, this is not the right idea, then you go back to the blackboard, and the typical cycle. So to surrogate the discovery of principles to an AI algorithm, that's a very strange thing to do. So this, I think, is going to take time, if ever, gets implemented. But I think there is a lot of potential there.
I agree. How about you, Claudio? What do you think?
First of all, thank you for the answer, very, very detailed. I will take a slightly different perspective from you. I guess I come from the, I will preface everything, these are all my opinions. I'm not representing the company. This is what I think. So I come from the world of computational material scientists, and there the paradigm is slightly different. So while you are looking at AI more as a tool to extract patterns from data, from what I gathered, in our field, the most impressive use of AI was to speed up computations. And in this regard, AI serves the role of a tool, but a very powerful one. I mean, computers are a tool, but they are an extremely powerful tool. And much like deriving an equation or solving a PDE by hand, numerically could take you hours. In a computer, it takes milliseconds. Well, a similar shift was observed thanks to AI. So in particular, in my field, one of the most widely employed computational methods to get accurate material data at the atomistic level is density functional theory. And it's a computational method, it's quite sound, but it is also quite slow. And for example, we have observed in the years going from 2007, there was a seminal paper by Beller and Parinello, up to now, there was an evolution of this AI algorithm that we were able to simulate what the DFT was doing purely from the data coming from DFT. And if you look at this, the speed up you could obtain was tremendous. We're talking about probably 10 to the 5, 10 to the 6 speed ups. So this is, I mean, you can frame it as a tool in the sense it's a thing that makes you go 100,000 times faster. But this also means that this unlocks things that were not possible before. You could not simulate with DFT systems of 2,000 atoms. That was crazy. Now we're simulating systems with, well, 5 million atoms with this almost the same accuracy. So I think the question, is it a tool, is it revolutionary? Well, it is kind of both, right? Much like computers, it is a tool, but it is revolutionary because by the virtue of how useful it is as a tool, it unlocks science and scientific questions that were just not accessible 10 years ago. So, yeah, I guess this is my answer to the question, to the paradigm question. It is a paradigm shift, but it's mostly because it's just a very good tool.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, this is a very interesting discussion. So now I wanted to shift our focus to a rapidly emerging area within AI that probably you have heard about that is generative AI and large language models. So in this context, I want to also discuss a little bit the role of big tech companies in advancing AI and physics research. So what's generative AI? You know that well, right, probably. It's a variety of techniques that allow you to generate new samples or new data that mimic the data the algorithm was trained on, right? So the idea is simple. So in this way, Gen AI systems are able to generate new tests, new content in general, and tests and images. And one of the most prominent examples of these technologies are large language models, right? In which probably the most celebrated example recently is OpenAI's GPT-4 model. And these models are really a good example of how an AI model that have been trained to generate and be able to understand a human-like test, how that can go beyond the initial scope and have broader consequences in society beyond natural language processing, right? So in the context of physics, generative AI and large language models are having a huge impact as well. So there is a class of algorithms called generative adversarial networks that have been used to simulate particle collisions, birational autoencoders that can generate new molecular structures by learning the distribution of known materials. Then there are probably you have heard about also restricted Boltzmann machines. Those models have been very useful to understand quantum systems, autoregressive models that actually can predict future state of atmospheric conditions in connection with the amazing talk that we have heard previously about atmospheric also processes. There are also, probably you have heard about transformer-based models that people have been using lately to analyze and predict plasma behavior, very useful also for nuclear fusion. Diffusion models that have been used in astronomy to reconstruct high-resolution images in telescopes and many more, right? So this is Gen AI. And on the other hand, we have large language models that actually they have shown their capability in assisting in the discovery of new physical laws, actually, and enhancing also computational astrophysics, and this idea of autonomous experimental design and execution, right? That is a really interesting idea. And in this context, big tech companies are playing an increasingly crucial role, right? because they have the infrastructure, they have the tools, and they have probably the research support to advance these AI applications in physics in particular. So, so we need somehow to structure effectively a communication between academia and big tech in order to benefit for the sake of physics, essentially. So there are interesting discussions there, open source, between proprietary codes. Before we were talking about some subtle angles to that. So in general, so what do you think about this whole landscape of Gen AI and LMMs? Claudio, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So let's start from the LLMs, because I guess these are the most widespread tools in that regard. Well, LLMs can play a useful role in the hands of a scientist, I think. One example use of that is, for example, literature searching. I think a few years ago, there were a lot of papers trying to gather databases of experimental results, for example, from papers. And this was before large language models were as good as now. And those papers had a lot of effort to go through to try to clean the data, gather it in a sensible way, and put it in a database. And I think, and it was a tremendously useful effort, but I think now we're at a point where that effort can be overtaken by a large language model, for example, just for literature observation. And I think that's just a very tremendously useful tool. When you go to discover new physical laws, well, I am no expert in that, to be honest. My opinion is that all these generative models live and thrive on the data they are generated upon. So you can expect only to be very good at what it has seen already. So I will leave that to the experts, but let's say that I'm skeptical in the extrapolation capability at such levels. Extrapolation capability at small levels, I think they have shown to be good at small interpolations, but not at leaps that require years of scientific research. Coming to generative model, well, generative models, well, you can call LLMs generative models if you want. Let's now shift a bit more to generative models which are specifically trained for scientific applications. Those have a similar narrative, really. They depend on data. They depend a lot, they require usually large amounts of data and are able to synthetically generate new data. So if your discipline of interest requires or would benefit from such an approach, then they are incredibly useful tools, right? 6 months ago, one of the papers I worked on was a generative model for materials. And there we looked at the existing material structures and we tried to predict new ones that have interesting properties. And in similar fields, we have seen many other models that generate proteins or molecules with similar properties. So I think, again, if you are in a field that requires or has the objective to find new objects that have properties that resemble a distribution from the data set, but maybe in some remote areas that you have not explored, generative models, for example, offer a tremendously useful tool for that. Also, it is very useful to just generate more data. Let's say that you just need more variations on the same theme, which is actually a requirement that many fields have. Like, you might just want more variations of the same pictures of galaxies. I honestly have no idea here, but and there actually these models are exceptional at that. And if you have good metrics to measure them, then you can trust them. Of course, here the key thing is to have the data and to know what you want to measure. I think, but this is always true in science, I guess.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Verónica.
So coming back to this, the capacity of generative models to generate new data. They train on data, they can generate similar data. And that's what leads you to think that those are not going to lead to a leap, right, in terms of our understanding, because they are just, continuous extrapolations of what we know. But for example, in your area in particular, I guess it helps identifying new properties of new possible materials. And that's useful, I guess, in your case. Because then you can go and check and do your experiments. And in my field, generative AI is used from the experimental side or in terms of simulation. So same idea. You have a lot of possible things that could happen, physical processes. Imagine a collision in the Large Hadron Collider. Those are expensive to simulate from end to end because those are complex systems. And training a generative algorithm can speed up things by a lot, as you were saying. In cosmology, sadly, the same story. It helps you create templates very fast that then you can test against what you see. So statistically, it's really, really useful. But then there is the question whether this brings anything else about this quantum leap you were saying. Can it go any farther? And it's, at least in terms of simulating physical processes, I think what people have seen, not myself directly, is that when you train, let's say, a variation autoencoder or whatever, in this internal space, it will tend to kind of populate everything. So from data I've seen, or examples that you've seen, to other examples and somewhere in between. So we've seen that this generative AI is very good at interpolating and filling gaps, right?
That's right.
And, but always in a way that is very physical, because in physics, unless there is something happening abrupt, like a phase transition or whatever, you are going to have things, parameters that are going to be continuous. So the workings of the generative AI, I think they respect that. And that's why they are so successful. And then when it comes to LLMs, the adoption is not huge, I would say. They have been adopted in a way that is kind of original. For example, thinking on these things as being like predictors for time evolution, or you know, like strange uses of LLMs. But as far as I know, there is no interest in, for example, something you mentioned, like this literature-based discovery. It's a beautiful idea, and I don't know how far one could go with it. The idea is that people, we researchers, we read papers, and we get ideas from the few papers we read. Maybe if I place this idea with this idea, and I can get a new idea that is original and interesting. This is our work a lot of the time. So the literature-based discovery would be same, but instead of a person, it's an AI that it has enormous capabilities to make connections. And as far as I know, this is a beautiful idea, and I don't know if in your area it has had any kind of traction or...
Yeah, I guess it's similar to, I guess, Claudio's experience. I mean, like, you can definitely use LLMs to, for instance, create a database from all the previous literature, but then the literature actually is lacking, I mean, because you publish only positive results,
yeah,
right?
That's important.
So, and then that's an application of LLMs that probably is not going to go too far because of that. But coming back to the question of how to structure, this collaboration between academia and companies. Claudio, do you have any experience, establishing partnerships with universities? Because at the end of the day, it seems that the big investment is happening in companies, right? And usually, when you are working in a research project, the budget is tight, and you cannot afford training a model from scratch or even tuning a large language model. So I don't know what is your view, and also Veronica's view on that, right?
So companies can do two things, right? They can develop models internally and release them, which they are doing to a certain extent. And we see a lot of open language models are out there, and actually quite good ones, like all the Llama series, for example. So that's already a tool that research companies can provide. Again, for example, I am part of a research company, so our target is to do research, is not to develop products. And you see it all over the place. You see language models gets released, diffusion models, generative models, all of these things can be made open source. So that's already, I think, a positive contribution of companies that are basically, there are still private companies at the end of the day, but they're contributing to the scientific landscape in a positive way. Then more direct collaborations, I guess, are more dependent on the exact time, topic, and situation. So my colleagues, I have started to establish some academic collaborations, or will look into that, or have done it in the past. I guess those work much like you would expect any other academic collaboration at the end of the day. You have an interest, you look for another group that has an interest that is complementary to yours, and then you come together and get a project going, right? So in that sense, I don't think it's a dramatic shift. It is true that in general, big companies have slightly more computational power, and that can be used positively. And so, for example, if you have a collaboration with academia, usually computational hours are offered as part of the deal. That's quite common, as I saw. So that's already another positive feedback loop, let's say, that you can develop.
But you would say, like, somehow the lead of AI will be, you know, it will be moving to companies having enough GPUs, let's say, to train the right model, or
well, there will be an aspect based on large models, that's for sure, but we have seen that you can, it's not all about how many GPUs you have, luckily. There is an incredible amount of research that either does not require GPUs or requires very few. For example, one way to be very efficient is to take these large pre-trained models that are open source and fine-tune them. And fine-tuning requires much less computational effort than pre-training, because the big bulk of the work is the pre-training. So that alone can allow any small group with access to moderate resources to play on the field of these large models, but with the resources that are available there, for example. So I don't think there will be this great divide, because at the end of the day, the large part of the computation will be used for other things. At the end of the day, research is still a field where maybe the tech has more computational tools than other resources. But for example, you have national labs. National labs are starting to be very well equipped with GPUs. I don't know exactly the Spanish landscape, but in Italy also I know there are some strong computational resources. I'm sure here too. Like there has recently been a lot of European fund investments in this. So I really think that the tools are there. It's just a matter of using them efficiently.
Okay, I see. Interesting. And you, Verónica, do you feel this divide coming to us, or?
Maybe we should remind that the public that the leap of artificial intelligence, probably through computer vision, the algorithms that were used and they are still used, let's say, like convolutional neural networks and so on, everything has been done from the academic sector up to a point, right? Nowadays, there is more development of new algorithms coming from Meta, Google, etc. But the ideas, they come from academia often, and then the applications, and like. So in that sense, it's not a divide, because it's actually turning around, and now the part of this development is now in big companies, and I'm sure many more new algorithms and breakthroughs will come from companies in the future. But just to say that everything was started there. We are also the providers of the talent you use, huh?
Not me personally.
No, not exactly. It's used by the companies. And then, no, I don't feel it a big divide, because, again, I don't feel the companies are, you do have more computing resources, because indeed, to do research, you usually need fewer computational resources to do proof of concept and so on. And nowadays, I think even in the Spanish system, we are well geared to do this. Like we have clusters for GPUs, we have access. So it's not like you pair with a company because it can provide resources. On the other hand, thanks to big companies like Meta or Google, we have these tools.
Or Microsoft.
Or Microsoft, that I haven't used. These tools like TensorFlow, PyTorch, whatever, stuff that we use in a daily basis, and is offered by these companies and help us accelerating everything we want to do. So this is extremely useful that these companies provide free licensed products that we can use. This has helped a lot, and I don't know how to quantify this help. And I will also say that now in academia, nowadays, I think it's more in the minds of everyone that our students, when we train them, or our personnel, we should give them an additional, more connection with companies.
Definitely.
So often we have placements and so on. So this collaboration with the private companies or big tech is something that is positively viewed now, whereas maybe 10 years ago it was viewed like a drain of our brain power. I don't know. I don't know if it's your experience too.
Yeah, somehow we need to work together, right? Because now it seems it's the right moment to establish some synergetic, collaboration between academia and companies more than ever. So, but we need to move to another block of this panel. It's about ethical challenges, right? Whenever you talk about AI, you cannot avoid talking about ethical challenges, and in the application of AI to physics, the ethical challenges are not so large as when you are using huge models, in an industrial setting where there are bias mitigation and there is a lot of stuff going on. Here, probably the biggest challenges are regarding sustainability, energy consumption. So essentially, like when you need to train a large model in AI, in particular a large language model, you need to consume a lot of energy. There is this number that people basically have published that if you want to train a single large language model, you have to consume as much energy as the energy consumption of several hundred homes over a year. So that basically forces us to rethink a little bit the impact of our research practices. And similarly, regarding resource allocation, should be out there any guidelines on how much computational power can you use for a given project? There are interesting questions there. And this is the first part, and the second big ethical challenge that I found that probably is closer to us in academia than probably to companies, although Microsoft in particular writes a lot of papers, but is the use of large language models in scientific writing, right? So all of us, we know that you can use a GPT model to write and edit a paper, right? But, and this obviously can enhance your productivity, and can ensure clearer communication. I think papers are now written in better English than 5 years ago. But there are some questions, ethical questions about the authorship and the integrity of the scientific publications, right? So imagine that you use some large language model to write a part of your paper or something. Something that probably not so people have thought is that how can you ensure that the content you are adding to your paper is original and is not taken from some other paper, right? Actually, I don't know if I'm spoiling your intervention, Verónica, but she was telling me about this experiment that you can do, that you can try to find good titles for your next paper, right? And then you were mentioning that there were amazing titles that GPT was essentially providing, and then you had this very cool idea of Googling, of looking in Google, one of the titles, and one of the titles was out there in some other paper. So this is probably a problem when you are using AI for generate text for your papers. So at the end of the day, somehow, as a research community, we have to address all these technical questions and ethical questions, and somehow ensure that the large language models, or even this huge consumption of energy that we are using in our AI simulations, that can allow to advance in a more powerful way in our physics understanding, but also to somehow allow our values or our responsibilities to be implemented in those areas. So it's a tough area, but what are your insights, Verónica, for instance?
Well, so if we go to sustainability,
Yeah.
you know how we tell our students, this is big or small respect to what, right? If it's dimensionful, you need to tell me the comparison. So I always feel a bit, when we say these kind of things, like for example, training a large language model from A to Z, not retraining as you were saying, but it requires that amount of energy. As compared to what? Like looking at pictures or videos of cats, or all the emails and the spam we received. There is always this issue that we have to be responsible, which is very important, but it will also be nice to put it in context. I'm saying this because I work in particle physics, fundamental physics. This has evolved into huge collaborations where the next question needs to be answered by a huge experiment that requires a lot of money. So back then it was thinking more in terms of money. And CERN, for example, the price tag is of the order of few billions. And this seems like a high price, but as compared to what? Right? To a few Hollywood productions, it's always... So in terms of sustainability in my area, what I see is that people are thinking in terms of a big issue that we have, which is physics is international, like the speaker before was talking about, right? It's an international endeavor. And it relies on people exchanging ideas, and that means travel, and that means, all speaking English and all. So instead of a price tag, nowadays we think in terms of the CO2 imprint of, for example, of the conferences we do, and so on. And the newer thing is indeed the CO2 imprint of all the computing resources we've needed and we will need for the next challenge. I don't have an answer to that. I'm a theoretical physicist, but I have this. This concept that of the Q-tip problem is that the idea is that when this question about the use of plastic and how bad it is for nature was put forward to the public, then somehow there was this movement to get rid of Q-tips. You know what Q-tips are? These things they use to clean your person, and they don't use them, but they have this plastic thing. And then there was this movement to get rid of them because that was a problem. It's a Q-tip problem. It doesn't change the problem, but you focus on it, all your efforts, this is something you can do, and it's actually irrelevant for the bigger problem. So personally, again, as a theorist, I'm not working in the experimental collaborations. In our area, it would be nice to have a global view of our imprint, and not just from traveling and conferences, computing, and in general. And I don't see that. So this I'm missing. But what is great is that now we are aware, we talk about this. I can use it as an excuse not to travel too much. So it's always good. So I think we had to go a bit farther in this direction. But before, again, we are physicists, we should deal with this in a global, systematic way. And I think we are missing this. There are efforts, particularly from CERN, of dealing with sustainability. So recently, at the beginning of this year, there was an accord signed by CERN and the main UK provider, let's say, STSC, on sustainability. But the content is not about reducing our imprint. It's about providing solutions, right? Algorithms that reduce the amount of this or that, but not really our own needs. So I think there's a lot of talk. It's good to talk, but I don't see a lot of coherent.
That's right.
I could talk about the LLMs, or maybe you want to talk about sustainability in your case before.
No,
Okay, LLMs. But my view is that, again, you have a computer, you use it. You have a calculator, you use it. You have a new tool that helps you write up faster, you are going to use it. I'm not using it because I'm too scared. I'm not using it to write papers, obviously, but I think younger people are adopting these tools, and they kind of hide this. And I don't think there is any need of hiding the fact that you use LLMs to speed up the write-up of a paper or improving the grammar or stuff like this. But indeed, as you say, with a caveat, our work has to be original. And even if you are helped by an LLM, the same way that you are helped by your computer or by your calculator, one should check these things. And indeed, I think if we start looking at, there are tools for plagiarism, right? That you can put your text and it will tell you the amount of percentage that is from other text. I think if you use ChatGPT, please do use these plagiarism tools that at universities they are often freely offered, so you can use them. Just, advice there.
That's a great advice, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start in reverse. So I'll start from the LLMs. I completely agree with you. It's just a tool. So if you use it with conscience and just not. I mean, for example, an exceptional use of this tool would be a person that does not have a strong English writing skills and needs to make their manuscript understandable in English. That's perfect. I mean, you take what you wrote in your own language and you transcribe it. That's the original, right? Because you're just using a transcription. So instead of paying for someone to translate it, you just do it on the LLM. And that's a perfectly fine use of the tool. Of course, if you say, write me a paper on this, and you copy-paste it and submit it, that's your own fault. You are just trying to commit fraud at the end of the day. So, as with everything, just be conscious of what you do. And again, the plagiarism tool is a great way to avoid accidental copying, for example. Because, of course, if you just take what it did, it might contain something that you did not, that somebody else already wrote. So absolutely in line with that. Just use it with conscience when you need it, and to just either iterate on the original content or translate. Don't use it to try to. And in general, I think this is my personal opinion. We should write fewer papers, I think.
Agreed.
In general, it's not like we have to speed up even more. There's enough papers around. Going to the sustainability question, which is, I think, a bit the bigger one. I'm also in line with what you just exposed. I think it's great that we talk about it. I think it's great that we are conscious of the problem, because it's basically a Damocles sword hanging on us. So it's very important to talk about it, but we have to put everything into perspective. Like, can you compare that? For example, if you invest a lot of money and GPUs to come up with, I don't know, a piece of engine of a jet that makes the jet uses 0.5% less fuel, that's actually an incredible impact on CO2. So it's always the same question, right? Should we try to advance technology, use the technology to advance it so that we use less in the future, or should we stop? And I mean, this is, I guess, an ethical debate. I think, as with everything, use the reason. So don't waste energy. But if you require energy for your scientific endeavor and your scientific endeavor has positive outcome on the future, by all means, use what you need. So, yes, I think it's definitely a problem of framing. It's a problem of conscious use. And it's also a problem of realizing that the resources we have are limited and we should be wary of how we use them. But again, I do not fall into these skepticisms of like, no, let's just shut down everything because otherwise, well, that has never worked before. And unfortunately or fortunately, the energy that these things use is still a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what everything else uses. So.
And whatever, I don't know, climate change solutions might be, they might be technological and not just reducing resources. So technology needs to advance. I think.
Right. That's right. It's a very good point, like this trade-off between, yeah. So let's move to the last block of this panel. And now let's talk a little bit about education, right? In particular, there is this lack of skilled talent in AI, and we need to wonder how universities or institutions, academic institutions, how they need to evolve to produce the talent that is needed to drive what many people agree right now is a new industrial revolution, right? So what's happening is that this fast pace of advance of AI basically is outpacing the amount of people that can effectively use AI, right, for scientific research. There is not enough people to apply these techniques, essentially. So, so this is a challenge for all of us, right? But also an opportunity for academic institutions to evolve and see how we can prepare the next generation of scientists, right, of physicists in our case. So, so we need to address this gap, and universities need to be proactive in this sense. So there are ideas that some of them have been mentioned here, the integration of AI courses. Probably the teaching of AI shouldn't be restricted to computer science departments, should be integrated in physics, chemistry, biology departments as well. So there you will have an interdisciplinary approach that will ensure that, you know, like different scientific backgrounds will be able to develop and apply AI. Also, what you were saying before, hands-on experience, establishing collaborations with industry, so students can do internships and have real-world experience dealing with AI problems. So as a case study, let's say, at Autónoma de Madrid, starting this September, we are going to be teaching a new official course in the master degree in physics of condensed matter physics and biological systems. That is going to be a multidisciplinary course that will be bringing into the same classroom to physicists, chemists, and biologists, and we are going to teach them AI tools for their research. And hopefully, in a couple of years, there is this initiative to introduce an undergraduate course as well at Autónoma de Madrid with the same spirit, like teaching, you know, like AI to physicists in our case, last year course, and we believe that that is going to really have an impact on the curriculum, physics curriculum at Autónoma de Madrid. So this is again, it's a tough thing to do for somebody teaching, because the curriculum has to be very dynamic. So we are talking about this amazing pace of AI. So universities should be able to update very regularly the curricula of these courses, and we need to find ways of establishing this collaboration between industry and academia in an effective way. So there is a lot of action going on in that space. So I would like to get also to your view on that. I don't know.
I would just say your course will be oversubscribed. Everybody would like to take it. I think so. Yeah. Like in my own research institute, whenever we offer machine learning or deep learning courses, it gets totally, you know. I think the young people realize this is an important skill to have. I'd like to say, you know, there is this shortage of skills, but in general, there is shortage of people skilled in STEM subjects. I don't know in Spain what the numbers are. In the UK, the numbers they were saying is that they needed 50,000 per year more people on STEM. And of course, they had to recruit from abroad because they were not keeping up the pace of training enough people. I don't know if it's the case in this country or not. So with that context that we need more people doing STEM, yeah, AI is a big thing. in my experience, many people that end up, like finish, let's say, their degree in physics or their PhD or even postdoctoral level, and they move to the private sector, they end up, well, before they were becoming often in the finance sector. They were recycling. The theoretical physicists will end up being hedge funders or whatever. But nowadays they are data scientists. They need to be trained in AI. But they do find their own ways of training themselves. I think at that level, if you have someone with a PhD in physics, they will find a way of, I don't know, in other areas, that's so easy to do. But I haven't found a person that wanted to move in this direction. I couldn't find a way. This is my experience, but maybe you from the private sector, you have other.
But I mean, we're talking about education, so the private sector is not playing a huge role here.
But when you receive people, do you find that you had to train them additionally, or they already come with the correct skills?
Yeah. When we hire people, even for internships, they're already highly skilled, I would say.
But that's my feeling too.
Yeah, I think first of all, we have to demystify AI.
Yeah.
It's just linear algebra on a computer. Like, that's it. And it's linear algebra that done very well, a lot, with a few tricks. But at the end of the day, if you know calculus and you know how to program, teaching yourself at least a usage that is appropriate, I'm not saying about developing new algorithms, but at least using them is very trivial. There are a lot of good online resources. It's incredible. I think it's one of the most widely documented areas of research. You just look online, you can find incredibly talented and precise courses. So really, I think the most important part that academia can play is pique the interest of people in AI by having these courses, for example, but maybe more importantly, teach computational tools like coding. I think learning how to code is much harder than learning how to use machine learning. And I think that's the critical step that sometimes is missing. If you teach people during their undergrad and master's degree how to code, for example, Python is the most widely used college, but it doesn't have to be Python. Once they know algebra, they know calculus, and they know how to code, well, if they have a course in machine learning, it's probably better. But if they're interested, to make the step is very simple for them if they're curious. Just go online. You have the coding capabilities to apply what you learn, and you have the algebra to understand what's going on. Once you have these two, it's very simple to then translate.
But nowadays, that you don't, I had a feeling you don't need to code anymore, right? There is all these fantastic helpers that you don't actually need that skill anymore. So it brings down to simply know how to think, have a mathematical background, some statistics, and then know how to use these tools properly. I'm not sure that coding is any longer, or will be, let's say in 5 years' time, like a super important skill. This is just, a view from outside. But I don't know what is because you put the emphasis on the learning of some programming languages. I agree, but we all learn, let's say, Fortran or C, or in my epoch it was Fortran. Now the students learn Python, all of them, a bit. But is this going to be relevant in 3 years' time? Not even sure. Whereas thinking is something that takes years to learn.
On the last sentence, I cannot say
agree
anymore. It's obviously true. But I actually want to stress the importance of good coding. It's you can be a user without strong coding skills, but to be a developer or an innovator, I think some level of coding is required, at least for now. Maybe in a few years' time with all the assistants and everything, it will be easier. But I still think that you really have a strong, deep usage of the methods. You still need, I'm not saying you need to be a software developer. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying that you need enough coding skills to understand exactly what's going on and to act upon it if necessary. And this is to be a developer. You can still do a lot of amazing science while being a user. And then you just need the basics. You just need to know how to use it, and that's it. And that already requires very, you still need Python or whatever coding skills, but it can be not of so much as a focus. You can be much more focused on how you apply them, on why you apply them, or on the theoretical sides, and you just use this as a verification tool, for example.
Because I guess I'm a bit biased. What I see is from theoretical physicists that move into the private sector, and if they ever try to compete with, let's say, computer scientists in the programming, they will lose every time, right? Whereas it's not that they are not going to be able to contribute, it's that their contribution is different. They think differently, they're more abstract, they can make connections that maybe somebody so into coding cannot do. So they end up managing people and groups and being quite successful without having this fantastic modular, whatever way. This is, again, my very little view of it. But since you work actually in teams with physicists, I don't know if that's also your experience.
Well, in my area, I guess everybody has good coding skills.
Yeah, that's like a requirement.
It is a requirement, yes.
Very good, okay.
You're right in the sense that you can be a group leader very effectively without having strong coding skills. But in any case, you can be a researcher without strong. What I was trying to stress more is to have a light, like, you don't need to be an expert, but you at least have to know something. And that first step, what I observed, is actually the hardest. Going from zero coding skills to enough to understand what's going on is the hardest step. Then, okay, you can become a software developer, fine. But that's not what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on that step that allows you to then confidently dive into the tools without fear of, oh no, I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, I just want something, a screen, and I don't want to look behind. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I think that first step is what sometimes is missing.
I get you. I understand.
The advancement, then if you want to become a software developer, that's your choice. But I think the key thing is missing in machine learning for scientific applications is just that first step.
So it's an amazing discussion. Thank you so much. So we need to start wrapping up the panel. First, let me thank you, Verónica and Claudio, for this amazing discussion. I have learned a lot, and I hope you too. So let me just finish by telling you that probably this panel is part of an ongoing talk, an ongoing dialogue that we need to have in our field, right? To see how we are shaping it. And there are a lot of, as you saw, there are a lot of issues going on, right? Like the nature of scientific discovery in this age of AI, the ethical uses of AI, and many more topics. So this is particularly aimed at the younger generation that probably are the ones that will be leading this revolution, right, going forward. So thank you so much, everyone, for attending the panel, and we will be ready for a few questions, if you will. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. So I have one question. So Rolf Hoffmann, who is Nobel Prize of Chemistry, he gave he's a quantum chemist, okay? He gave a talk in a conference a couple of years ago, and the title of his talk was The End of Quantum Chemistry. So this is a bit of the first topic that you touched upon in the dialogue, right? So it's like, he was saying, okay, we've been all our time, all our career, all the 20th century, like developing chemical theories to predict how molecules will form, how materials will form based on chemical theory, right? And right now we have like force fields based on machine learning that, it's like, we don't need that anymore. So what's your feeling about that? So you think that like this revolution right now, I mean, the impact of artificial intelligence will have in some specific fields, they're going to be basically killed? We are not going to no longer need quantum chemists or material scientists. Claudio, I'm also a material scientist trying to do predictions of materials, right? So we believe that we need theories to predict materials. We need understanding to predict which material is going to be the best, right? So I'm not going to be, I'm no longer going to be needed.
No, I just wanted to say that probably the full version of that sentence could be the end of quantum chemistry, long life to quantum chemistry. in the sense that these methods, probably this is what you are thinking as well, these methods are going to enhance, the capabilities of the field, but probably Claudio, you have been working in particular with machine learning in force fields. You can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I can actually tell you that, yeah, I mean, this is the moment we need quantum mechanics the most, because all these algorithms, they rely on data. And how do you get the data? You get them from a person that knows how to do the calculations. And how do you get the good calculations? Well, from people who develop the theories that allow for the calculations to be good. So, I mean, I wouldn't say it's the end of quantum chemistry by any stretch, to be honest. Like, even in DFT, like we use DFT as a ground truth, as an oracle, but DFT itself is absolutely not solved. There are so many challenges that still need to be overcome in the development of theories that are wide enough, capture enough phenomena, are accurate with respect to more computationally demanding methods. So I would say a resounding no to this. I think actually this is the moment where the people who develop the theories, the people who know how to run the calculations, they will be required the most. Mm-hmm. Because without data, these algorithms are just random parameters. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Verónica?
I mean, in my area, it's even, I think, more clear because we want the fundamental theory. We want to verify it, discover a new one and so on, so we cannot rely on AI. Or simulations to AI. We do simulations to compare with data to actually find this principle that we are missing. So what is dark matter, why there is matter and not antimatter. There are so many questions and this AI is not going to solve it for us. So still the people are needed. Their brain is needed.
That's good. Okay.
So, first of all, thank you for the discussion. I think it was really informative and really thought-provoking. I have a question, and for that I want to circle back to the ethics of AI and AI training specifically. For example, if you've mentioned large language models and how it can be an ethical issue if in the originality of the text that we produce, but I have a different question, which is that how can we make sure that the models that we use are trained ethically, meaning that these large language models, as far as I understand it, they take hundreds of texts and through data sets that maybe are not collected with the with consent of all of the humans that created these texts. So, which is the implication of using maybe, I don't know, data taken without consent into creating a model that will then influence our science?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Right. A very good question, I would say. And so you're focusing on training the language models based on stuff that other people have written. And again, it's when you use it and you see that your output is actually ideas, thoughts, and formulations of other people, that's an unethical use if you end up publishing, but that's also, I would say, an unethical produce of this LLM. And there should be curators and there should be, ways of avoiding this happening. And as far as I know, this is not actively pursued. Maybe I'm wrong. I know that at the beginning, the LLMs like GPT, the development was worried about that the output being unethical in terms of being abusive, sexist, and so on. And curators, human curators, were put in place to make sure to remove this content. But as far as I know, nobody, this is not in the radar of these LLM developers to make sure that the output is not simply a copy-paste of something, as far as I know. And that's an important, it's true that is the next stage in terms of ethicality, of ethical use. I don't know if this is something that you in Microsoft worry about, and I guess not in your research, being on material science.
Yeah, this is not a topic I really touch much.
Often because we use, as researchers, we use data, ideas, and so on that are public, open source, etc. So the authors gave the permission explicitly. But what you mentioned is true. We actually don't know the true sources of GPT, for example. And it is not public and disclosed.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe that was my point. That maybe we should be vigilant and try to make sure that the tools that we're using were created ethically in order to know that our final output is also ethical.
Yeah, because as you say, we can vicariously be participating in something that is not ethical, not wanting to. Yeah, a very good point. I don't know the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was a great discussion. I wanted to ask if you have felt that maybe physicists have a good coding background and they know the math, so they learn the syntax and can code well. But specifically from the industry, have you felt that people coming from physics, maybe they don't have the coding good practices like versioning, commenting, packaging, that maybe people with formal education in computer science have? Is that something that is seen?
Well, it depends much on your personal experience. I am trained as an engineer, like a materials engineer. So I'm quite far away from coding practices, at least in my master's degree. I guess it really depends on your personal history. What I can say is that we, for example, usually look for these skills. Like these are required to work in large teams, for example. So I really cannot generalize because the history of each individual is completely different from every other. I've seen all kinds of people apply, some with the exceptional coding skills, some with the zero coding skills. It really depends on the individual. What I can just recommend if you want to pursue a career in industry is to develop these practices because they are required usually. That's the only advice I can tell, really.
Yeah, actually, Claudio was, over the coffee, was mentioning that in general, the aim is not hiring a computer scientist that is also a physicist, but you hire a computer scientist and a physicist, right? And then somehow within the company, right, you do the training or the mix, I don't know how, but I guess that's the idea, right? Yeah. Thank you. So if there are no any other questions, so let me thank again to the members of the panel and all of you for being here.
Thank you.